Ron DeSantis, he's making enemies. He's making enemies over there at The View. Whoopi Goldberg is furious, specifically at Ron DeSantis. She calls him a freak who's trying to rewrite history.
There is not America's history without these brown and black people. That's what I want to hear him say tonight. Because one of the things that he knows is that women in particular have worked, and particularly brown women, have worked their butts off to make sure that he became the president. And I need to hear him say, this bonehead in Florida and in Texas is out of step with America.
Yeah.
He's out of step with who we are as a nation, because there is no nation without us. And I need to hear him say that as my president.
Yes.
I need to know that he's aware that there are freaks out there who are trying to change history, and he's not going to stand for it. That's what I want from you, Joe.
At least for that last part, fact check true. There are freaks out there who are trying to change and rewrite history. It's not the freaks that Whoopi's talking about, but there are freaks trying to do that. In fact, the most prominent example of this in recent years was called the 1619 Project. It was a project of the New York Times that the New York Times put millions and millions of dollars into promoting. It's now made its way into schools. It was written by Nikole Hannah-Jones, I think is her name. Nikole Hannah-Jones, whose central thesis, the whole thesis of the project, was that the motivating factor for the American Revolution was to preserve slavery. And so the true date of America's founding is not 1620 when the Pilgrims arrive on the Mayflower. It's not 1776 when the Revolution kicks off. No, it's 1619 when the first slave ships arrived on the East Coast. The central thesis was proven wrong. It was debunked. It wasn't even just debunked by those of us on the right. It was debunked by left-wing academic historians who said that this woman who was setting out to rewrite history was just making it up. It was so thoroughly debunked that the New York Times quietly had to rewrite the thesis because not even the New York Times, which lies all the time, could defend it. That's who is rewriting history. The rewriting of history that we are getting constantly from the left, almost exclusively from the left. And so what Ron DeSantis is saying is we don't want those freaks rewriting history. Whoopi, you should be thrilled. The freaks who are trying to rewrite history, they're being kicked out of the classrooms. That's good. You should thank Ron DeSantis if Whoopi Goldberg had read any history ever in her life, which I am skeptical. I'm skeptical of that prospect. Speaking of the power of historical narrative, because this is what it's about. When the people who dismiss the culture wars, they say, oh, who cares? Who cares about some stupid story in the New York Times that then goes into some high school and then the kids learn it in their class? It doesn't. What does that matter? Who cares? The left cares. That's why the left is trying to rewrite history. And the left is trying to rewrite history because if you control the past, you control the future. If you control the past and you promote a history that is true, that is, our country is basically a good place and we have an obligation to love our country because patriotism is an extension of filial piety and America is an expression of Western civilization and Western civilization is a good thing and it's actually the greatest civilization ever in the world and it's animated by a good and true religion called Christianity and it's created the most beautiful works of art, the greatest achievements that we've ever seen from any human society ever. If you have that view, that is going to affect the way that you interact with your country today, right now, in the present. And it's going to affect the country that you are going to have into the future. If, on the other hand, you have a bunch of freaks in Whoopi Goldberg's terms, go in and rewrite history and say, actually, America is the most evil place ever. And actually, Western civilization, they never did anything good. They only did bad stuff. They're just colonizers and imperialists. And all the good stuff they ever got, they just stole it anyway. And it's all built on slave labor. And the West is responsible for slavery. Even though the West has practiced slavery less than any other civilization ever in the world, and today is the only part of the world that has actually abolished slavery. Yet, no, the West is responsible for it. That's why it's so evil and oppressive and terrible. Well, that's going to affect the way you interact with your society today. And it's going to determine the sort of society that you're going to have in the future, because you're going to hate the society that you've currently got, and you're going to want to tear down the best stuff about it. That's why people fight over history. That's why the conservatives need to stand firm. That's why Ron DeSantis going in, and Glenn Youngkin going in, and other people who are fighting this academic battle right now. That's why it matters when they go in and they say, no, we're not going to teach our students this crap, because classrooms are like crystal balls. And when you look into a classroom, you are seeing your country 20 years into the future. 7 or 8 years ago, conservatives love to say, oh, these snowflakes on the college campuses, these woke snowflakes, just wait till they get to the real world. That's going to be a big surprise for them. No, the woke people and the little snowflakes were smarter about this issue because they knew that they were going to get into the real world and they were just going to change the world and change the way that we all had to accommodate them. They were going to demand that we bend our perceptions to their absurd wills. They won. The classroom really was a crystal ball. You see this playing out right now in basic crime stories. This is a really, really disturbing story. I was reading it at the Daily Wire. Bicycling doctor allegedly murdered by man who reportedly muttered about white privilege. California emergency room doctor out for a ride on his mountain bike was allegedly murdered Wednesday by a man who police said struck him from behind with his vehicle, then jumped out and repeatedly stabbed him while, according to a witness, decrying white privilege. This would be funny if it weren't so sad, but think about the absurdity of this. A guy is driving along, I guess it was a black guy, is driving along, and presumably it wasn't a white guy. Although these days, I don't know, the white liberals are so self-hating, I guess it could have been, but I assume it was not a white guy. He's driving along, he sees a white guy. He is enraged. I imagine not merely by the color of the guy's skin, though I suppose it could have been that, but maybe he's enraged by the bicyclist riding too slowly. Maybe he's enraged by the fact that this guy gets to go on a bike ride while he's got to be driving and he's working or something. Whatever enraged him, he hits the guy, gets out of the car, and just starts stabbing this man to death while claiming to be the victim himself. While claiming that the man that he is murdering he's the oppressor. He's got all of the privilege. And he, the murderer, he's the oppressed one. He's the one who doesn't have it, is he's stabbing this man. Since it's California, the guy stabbing him will probably get off with a warning. Vehicle approached a cyclist at an intersection, drove around the victim after hitting him, exited the vehicle, went back, and just continued to assault the victim because of white privilege. If you believe that, if you believe what you are taught in schools and by the media and by the government and everywhere in the pop culture and by the diversity training at your office and by everything in the culture, if you believe that white people really are not only evil, but the source of all the evil in society, the very reason that society is broken, because the true evil that pervades our country is whiteness, structural whiteness that we have to abolish, then because ideas have consequences, you might take it into your own hands to abolish that whiteness by abolishing the life of the white person that you run into. And you would feel totally justified. If you are not particularly intelligent, as I can't imagine this murderer is, if you are not particularly thoughtful or well-educated, you could really believe that. As you are murdering someone, you say, wow, I'm doing the right thing. Wow, I stopped this guy from oppressing me with his nice private bicycle ride. That's the consequence of critical race theory. That's the consequence of the critical studies departments in universities and high schools now that tell you that America is an evil country and white people in particular are the problem. And if you're not white, you're justified in doing whatever you want to victimize the alleged oppressors. That's the consequence of it. Talk about freaks. Those are the freaks.